Okay, you're all set? All right, so I want to welcome everyone to our meeting of Tuesday, February 10, 2015. This meeting will be taped and rebroadcast at a later date. We're not running live tonight, as we have not been able to do so for quite some time through the...
We are live on Comcast.
Thank you very much for that clarification.
We have been for a number of months.
Very good. I appreciate that. My information is a little stale, I guess. So that's good. So we're live, which makes it even better. So we started our meeting at 6 o'clock. We had some interviews for various committee appointments to make. This is the beginning of our regular business meeting. So as has been our custom for many years, I'd like to invite everyone to please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Okay, so our 7 o'clock item here is to welcome Representative Jim Maselli, who's graciously given us some time this evening. My colleagues are well aware, but I'll just repeat for the benefit of those who are watching live, that we are initiating a series of discussions with our state delegation, Representative Maselli, tonight. In 2 weeks, Senator L'Italian, and a month from now, on March 10, I believe, Representative Lyons. And as each will attest, we made an effort to kind of craft an agenda that was of some importance based on a consensus of the board here of 5 or 6 items. We've provided that information to Representative Maselli, Lyons, and Senator L'Italian. And we're hoping to have, maybe a 35-minute discussion about those items with each of you. I want to first out of the gate, Representative Maselli, welcome you and thank you for getting over here under probably some tough circumstances here the last few days, weather-wise.
Well, I appreciate your invitation, and I always enjoy this. It gives us a chance to exchange ideas and hopefully pass on some information that you may not be privy to yet.
Awesome.
The only one caveat that I'll lay down in the beginning, it's early, too early really, to get a picture of the finances with the Commonwealth, because the local aid budget hasn't been crafted and the resolution hasn't been put into place, and no one really knows, and that's the executive and the legislative, although we've got a slight increase in some of the income coming in, exactly what the picture is going to look like. The thing we will be dealing with tomorrow, and I didn't mean to jump the gun, is the 9C cuts. That's when the governor, in conjunction with the legislature, has to put an agenda together to offset the shortfall for this year. And the 9C cuts are substantial. And they're doing one thing that's differently this year, and if I'm running on, stop me at any time. One thing they're doing that's differently, usually when we have an increase in capital gains tax, we put that in the rainy day fund. This governor has recommended, and the legislature agrees with him, that we take that increase in the capital gains funds and use it toward offsetting the deficit, which makes a lot of sense. You're really not increasing any taxes. And I'll stop.
We'll come back to that, I'm sure. Because ultimately, I know that discussion in large part centers around the preservation, hopefully, of local aid, and a lot of the bullet points that we want to talk about with you tonight pertain to the subject of state aid or assistance to the town of Tewksbury. So we appreciate your caveat, and we know that, particularly in light of a new administration, there's going to be, some changes and some time needed relative to the state budget and all that. And I know that we have enough communication that as things that impact us.
Oh yeah, I'll always keep in contact.
We appreciate that. So what we wanted to do, Representative Maselli, is just to kind of bring some order to all the chaos, if you will.
Right.
And one of the things that we definitely want to talk about, and I know that you're well aware because we've seen you and some of the newspaper stories, and you've been to some of the events that we've had recently around Route 38. Right. And one of the top priorities that we have as a board pertains to the improvement of Route 38. And I do want to acknowledge that you and Rep. Lyons and also Senator Feingold, or then Senator Feingold, were very helpful to us last year in securing some significant funding in the transportation bond bill. So I'd like to just lead off with that and give you the floor, whatever you can help us with on Route 38 and talk to us about for 5 or 10 minutes.
The involvement of this board has been substantial, and I thought that meeting that you had last week was very, very interesting, and I think it really spurred a lot of interest with some of the landowners and some of the property owners, and I thought it was well run. As you know, and you've been involved, the first portion of Route 38 is going to be some of the money that came out of that TIP program, and that's going to cover some improvements from the lower line to Astor Street, although they say Pine Street. So that's what that's going to be. Now let's move ahead. We have a line item in the bond issue for $10 million for Route 38. However, there's no money attached to that. It's like a shopping list. You've got a bond issue that comes up and everybody tries to get something in it. And we were able to get the Route 38 project in it. There's no money. I'm going to be emphatic. I don't want anybody to misunderstand. What we have to do as things develop, in fact, there'll probably be a meeting with the governor and to pull that project out, and you and I had discussed it, and you did on behalf of the board, maybe get some of that money to do some of the work that you want to do. I, for one, am somewhat in the blind because I haven't seen any proposal or any plan yet for what you want to do. But I know first and foremost that we've got to obtain some money. So I'm anxious to see what comes down the line as far as the board is concerned, so I can bring it into, say, the speaker, chairman of transportation, and try to prove to them why this is an important project. And I will say, and I keep saying it, it looks like an old cowboy movie when you drive down Route 38. And in some of the other towns that I've represented, same thing, but you got, just as you're trying to do, a lot of developers interested, a lot of people want to develop the property, and they've done a pretty good job as far as expending some state monies, some private monies in developing that portion of 38, and I'm confident that's going to happen here. And I may be asking some of you, or all of you, to come in when we set up that meeting with the administration. Because what we've got to do now is, we got that 10 million line item, it's like a shopping list. We've got to earmark some money, or a financial vehicle we've got to attach to that, so that we can move ahead with whatever plan you folks put in place.
So number one priority. So as it relates to the transportation bond bill, it really focuses on the hot top and the curbing and light signalization, you know, those infrastructure-based issues. So we can circle back through the town manager with some specifics, but the thought process I think that we talked about was kind of phasing it in sections or segments of the community.
And I thought what you said at your town meeting, and I'm not trying to inflate your ego, you said at the meeting you had recently, I think you covered all the bases. You covered all the bases, and the feedback, and as you walked through you probably got some yourself, feedback was, gee, this looks like they're finally going to start doing something. And it is. It's a center point here in the community. And I think not only the public, the people in town, but the investors, or the stakeholders, the businesses, are also very much interested.
So your support on that issue is greatly appreciated. I want to give my colleagues an opportunity on this subject matter to offer any
Something you
comments.
said that I might be able to shed some light on. I'm the representative on Northern Middlesex Council of Governments for the Board of Selectmen. I believe that they have done some study work on Route 38, so I think Beverly Woods can provide you, or Jay Donovan can provide you with some background that you need to bring forward so you can show the improvements that are needed on Route 38.
I was talking to Jay Donovan, because he and I have worked on some plans, some programs in the past, in the other part of my district. And when he worked there as a member of a board, because NIMCOG doesn't represent Wilmington, the MAPC does. He told me the same thing, that he said, we're anxious to see some kind of plan evolve from the town. I guess they've done a lot of studies, so a lot of the background work on population, things of that nature.
Mhm.
But I'll do what you are doing, I'll make sure that I stay in touch with them also on this
Well,
thing.
what I can do is convey, the next time we meet, I think it's next Wednesday with NIMCOG, I'll let them know that they need some information to bring forward from your side to bring to the state house, so you can at least show what
Right.
what they're looking for.
I think if you saw the headline in the Lowell Sun yesterday, that Mill City project, they had hoped to obtain some substantial funding, and it just hasn't evolved so that it's really become the piece of work that they want to. So we've got to get in there and set up a meeting very shortly and start talking about it, even if it's far in advance of any planning or whatever. And as the chairman said, you're talking about the hardware, you're talking about the sidewalks and the lights and shrubbery, things of that nature. And if you had if the MBTA, and I was very active in keeping the MBTA out of, I don't know if that's something to brag about now, keeping the MBTA out of Tewksbury because of the assessment at that time, got a call from Cressman, and we were just putting the package together, we kept it out. So you're really not part of the MBTA, but if you were, I'd see if I could get funding for a station on Route 38. But that's another story. But I'm open to any other questions too.
Yeah,
And
any
I've got a lot here. I've got a lot that I'd like to
for my
discuss.
colleagues.
It just sounds like if we have a more comprehensive plan for 38, from the north end, from the Lowell line to the Wilmington line, that would help us free up some of that money that we could show it to the governor and to DOT and say, this is what we want to do, we really need the funding, as opposed to, we just need money for 38.
That would help immensely. Because every other project that I've worked on, that's what we've done. We've shown them a concept of what we're trying to do. And when we put the wording into the line item, funding, let's say, it would spell out money to be spent for X, Y, Z. That's
We'll
it.
gather our team and we'll work through that. and
Good.
we'll collaborate a little further with you on that. So let me turn the page to the kind of macro subject of local aid. And you mentioned the 9C cuts, and certainly I think we well appreciate all your advocacy for us over the years and even now relative to maintaining local aid. What and I'm sure this is nothing new for you to hear, but we have always had the view that at best we're treading water. We don't seem to be getting ahead with respect to the state. And in fact, the levels of local aid, despite efforts at the legislative level, we're not even close to where we used to be as a town. So we need some help. That's the bottom line.
Just for the sake of the public.
Yep.
That applies to every
Agreed.
one of the 351 cities and
We
towns.
agree.
The one encouraging thing with this governor said he's not going to affect local aid. He's going to maintain it at the same level. But maintaining it at the same level is maybe a positive step, because his predecessor never said that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a positive step, but it doesn't solve the problem, does it? And we've got a meeting tomorrow morning, we've got a caucus on the 9C, but obviously the discussion of local aid will probably come up, and if there's anything new, I'll give you a call, and I can say it emphatically. I will be in there doing what I usually do, trying to get as much as possible on the local aid front.
And what we'd like to ask you to do, because we've recently had some bumps in the road, if you will, with respect to circuit breaker in the education world, special education, out-of-district transportation costs, all of those associated costs are becoming significant budget items, and they're driving some of our other decisions. So areas like that where there might be some specific legislative assistance or focus would be much appreciated.
And I'm gonna be upfront with you, I think in his 9C cuts, he has hit the circuit breaker, which I was hoping he wouldn't. But he's also taken a hit. And, his hands are kind of tied. He's taken a hit as far as the public health hospitals are concerned. And I get very parochial about that, because we must never forget, and you had a meeting up there with the chairman we must never forget that that hospital is one of our bigger employers. And number two, there are a lot of people who work there. And number two, the patients who are there are primarily local folks who have probably in the twilight of their years.
Agreed. So let me ask my colleagues, local aid's pretty broad subject matter, but any comments? Mr. Wentworth?
Yeah, just, Rep, I appreciate you being here. I just have
Yeah.
one question, because I was looking at some of the data on unrestricted general government aid, and it seems like Tewksbury lags compared to our neighboring towns in terms of unrestricted general government aid. We're about $81 per resident. Drake's about $101 per resident. Wilmington's about $94 per resident. Is there a way that we can increase our unrestricted general government aid to at least be at par with some of our
Yeah,
neighboring communities that we share, similar populations with? I mean, certainly Lowell and Lawrence, my colleague pointed this out, that their cities, they're at $200 and $217 per resident, much more than we are. But certainly with the neighboring towns, Drake, for example, they're right at par with us in terms of population, yet their local aid per resident is almost $20 per resident higher.
Let me say this first of all, backing up, you mentioned the cities. You can't begin to compare yourself to the cities.
Again, yeah.
That you're dealing with something that's
Sure.
completely different. As far as the unrestricted local aid, I think when you look at the whole package, as to what Tewksbury obtains out of that budget, and a lot of other towns like Tewksbury, it more than makes up for some of that unrestricted local aid. Some of the situations as far as, and I hate to keep bringing it up, say the land transfers. And you just had a meeting recently where, and I wasn't made part of that, but I wish I had been, where you met with the DCAM, and DCAM at that time said it's gonna cost you $195,000 to obtain, and I'm not digressing, but I think this is part of the picture. What was that, $195,000 to obtain that land that you need for the cemetery, which is outlandish. And we've got two bills in there right now. Like I said, we more than make up for it. We've got two bills in there right now. One is one that the senator put in, which goes back to the old value there, which is about 60,000. And I put in one that says nothing. We don't have to pay anything for that property. So that you're talking about 195,000. Representative Lyons and myself are setting up a meeting with the administration. And that's the direction we're traveling in. That we're talking about mitigation too, that maybe we should work out something and eliminate that cost of $195,000. That would be a form of local aid. That would be something that a lot of towns aren't getting, because as I said, when I found out, in fact, conversing with your chairman, called up after that meeting, that the state was saying, well, the land you're swapping for the cemetery land isn't up to par. Plus, we need some more money for the valuation of the land that isn't agricultural. That the total cost was $195,000, wasn't it?
That's correct.
$195,000. Thought it was outlandish. So as I said, we've got bills in there, but we're going to try and circumvent the bills. Representative Lyons and myself have already discussed it. We're in the process of setting up a meeting with A&F, and what we're trying to do is get that land for nothing. So we're always looking for an area where we can accrue some benefit to the community without their spending some money. So those things don't go unnoticed, I'll just tell you that.
Thank you for that. I just have one more question. Because
Go ahead.
I was concerned about this at the end of the last fiscal year. There was a surplus in gross lottery sales that typically was geared toward going to local aid. And I know the legislature voted to take that surplus in lottery sales, higher than projected revenue, and put it in the general fund. I'd love to know the thinking around that versus targeting that specifically for local aid, which I know the lottery was intended for, and instead moving that surplus in revenue from gross lottery sales into the general fund. rather than giving it back to the
Let me-
towns in the form of.
Let me tell you why, and I think we've discussed this before, you and I, in fact, at a meeting. But I'll tell you, the thinking behind that is, looking down the road, they saw that there was gonna be a deficit. And the questions at that time arose were, gee, is it gonna be 100,000? Is it gonna be 200,000? And some people were saying, you know what, we could go as high, mass taxpayers, 500 or 700, and they were right, 700,000. So rather, of course, I would rather have sent it to local aid, but rather than spend that money in that fashion, they set it aside, put it into the general fund, looking forward to if they needed it, they'd have access to it. But realistically, there was never any chance of that money coming back, and I'll be very frank. It garnered 30 votes, and I think the opposition was over 100 votes. And I think the opposition was in light of being more frugal with it and not giving it and then having to look down the road later on and taking something back. So this governor is committed, he's been adamant that things are gonna change. And that's what he has said privately too. And that's fine with me. It's fine with me.
Yeah, and I
Look
appreciate
forward to
that.
working with him.
And I know that revenues have increased about 4.4%. The problem is spending has increased about
That is the problem.
7.3%, which is probably why we're looking at a $765 million deficit. Are you working with the folks to sort of reduce spending? Because, growth of 4.4% is pretty good at these, in these times. The
Let me
problem
say,
is the spending at 7.3%.
let me say this, and I'm not on an ego trip. I've got probably one of the most frugal voting records in there. And I've done battle with a lot of speakers. A lot of people say they fight for it, but I actually have had problems with speakers. And people always say to me, how are you able to get what you get? And yet, you're involved in a debate and you vote against the speaker often. And it's tough taking votes against some of those, some of the things you're talking about. But I do it. I do it because it makes a lot of sense. Because I know where that money's gonna come from. You've only had so much money, and Windmer said it until he retired too, that it's a spending problem. And it is a spending problem. But I like to think I'm one of those guys who errs on the side of caution and is more restrictive. Of course, what you can do is this. You can always file amendments that say, spend nothing on this issue. Or you can file amendments that haven't got a chance in heck of ever passing, might garner 20 votes. When you file amendments, I always like to file an amendment hoping that it's got some shot of passing. And